Hey guys, welcome back. Roger says hey. Scarlett says hey. Scarlett? Wanna say hey? She's minding the squirrels. So we're back with Music Sunday. It's been a while since we've done a Music Sunday, but I wanted to get back to it, and we have a great request for it today from Patreon. This one, once again, is from Mike Lavoie, and I did another one of Mike's requests yesterday, so it's back-to-back days with Mike's Patreon request, but the only reason I chose his is because it is for Music Sunday. Mike says something different this month is under 15 minutes and would make a good video for Music Sunday. It's about the drastically different way classical music is performed today compared to how it was performed when it was written. Having been to several classical and Baroque concerts, I think I'd prefer the old way of doing it. Well, this should be interesting too, because I've been to a few classical concerts as well, but I don't know exactly what those differences would be. So this video we're going to be watching today is from the TEDx Talks channel. Obviously, I don't know if there's anybody on YouTube that doesn't know what this channel is. I think just about everybody has probably seen a video from them before. I certainly have. It makes me wonder if it's going to be copyrighted or not, but we'll give it a shot. So anyway, let's check out this video, Your Ears Deceive You.
Well, I'm so thrilled to be here because I grew up right here in Brookline and spent much of my childhood right across the street at the Brookline Music School.
Brookline?
So I'm thrilled to be here today to talk to you guys about something that nobody talked to me enough about when I was growing up. Now, I may be a classical musician, but I'm also a serious lover of pop music and often get asked what I feel the difference between the two is. Now, for me in the 20th century, it's roughly straightforward. We usually refer to classical compositions by their composer. We have Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. But we usually refer to pop music not by its composer. Max Martin wrote Baby One More Time. No, but we refer to it by its performer. So, but before the 20th century, things weren't quite so cut and dry. Each year, I begin my classes at Juilliard and the University of Buffalo by playing my students a piece of music and asking them to tell me what genre and time period it comes from.
First of all, I've never seen a flute look like that before. I'm not sure exactly what instrument that is. It sounds sort of like a flute, but it has a much lower tone than a flute typically does, I feel like. And that almost looks like a wood instrument, so that's a very interesting one. Also, the backdrop of cans is pretty cool. I feel like this selection, though, that she played, I feel like it's a trick question because it sounds like something that would have come from like the 1600s, you know? It's probably like a modern pop song that she's just playing in that style.
So whenever I play this piece, the immediate response I get from my students is that this has to be classical music and it's from the Baroque period. And they're right. I gave them a little hint by playing my Baroque flute. But they're totally right, and they're incredibly shocked when I reveal to them the original lyrics of this song. Once, twice, thrice, I Julia tried. The scornful puss has oft denied. And since I cannot better thrive, I'll cringe to ne'er a bitch alive. So kiss my ass, disdainful sow. Good claret is my mistress now. So these are the original lyrics, and my students cannot believe that this is classical music anymore. They tell me there's no way this is classical music because these lyrics are more like pop lyrics. They're far too lewd and inappropriate to be classical music, which is a serious, studied music, one that your parents make you listen to, where performers are always formally dressed, audience members are gray-haired, and there are previously dictated places about when and how you can enjoy the music. God forbid that any of you clap at the wrong time. Right? You've been there. So
I don't know. Like, to me, those lyrics definitely could have. I mean, the way that they're written definitely sounds old, like 1600, like Baroque era to me. Obviously, they use some, terms in there that we might associate with more modern terms, but, like an ass used to be a donkey, so, like, I don't know if that's what they were referring to. maybe they were referring to it like we do in a more modern sense, but it definitely did. I almost said Baroque. I wasn't sure, like, what time period Baroque was. I think it's 1600s, so I just said 1600s because that's kind of where I would place it. So at least my instinct was correct with that, and it wasn't like some, modern day pop song that she was just playing in that style. And also, I guess that flute is a Baroque flute, which is why I haven't seen it before.
So, but all of these stereotypes are very new to classical music. And today, we tend to lump almost all of the music before the 20th century into one single category, when this was not the way that composers, performers, and audiences alike viewed it in their day.
Well, yeah.
Once, Twice, Thrice, I, Julia, Tried was written by a man named Henry Purcell in the late 1600s. Purcell is known as one of England's greatest composers. He was the organist at Westminster Abbey and is known for many of his famous operas, plays, sacred religious music, as well as the music he wrote in service to the monarchs of England. But as you can see, he had a rather naughty side. So, in the time of Purcell, people didn't refer to music as classical or popular, but instead they referred to it by its function: religious, courtly, dance, or for just plain fun. People didn't have the instant access to music that we have today, and it was a real privilege. Those who were wealthy could afford to pay people to be their human jukeboxes. But for the 99%, if you wanted music, you had to create it for yourself. Purcell may have been composing music for the aristocracy in the church during the day, but at night, he and his friends, well, this isn't Purcell, but it could be, he and his friends would get together to compose and perform these innuendo-laden songs for fun. Now, for us today, it can be really hard to grasp that a composer's repertoire could be so diverse. But there were fewer boundaries and expectations in place as to what was acceptable for a musician to do back then. And the classical or serious and popular music worlds shared a very blurry line. Composers including Haydn, Mozart, and Brahms all quoted popular music in their concert music. And people behaved at concerts the way that we behave today at pop and jazz shows. They would clap when they liked a particular solo or melody. They were rowdy, drunk, they'd walk in and out, and they'd often make the performers repeat pieces they liked 2, 3, even 4 times. But the performers and the composers loved this because applause was the highest form of flattery. And they would brag to each other about how quickly they could get an audience to applaud. Famous musician Hans von Bülow once said, he'd brag to his students, that he was able to get the audience clapping in the middle of his cadenza of his Beethoven concerto, even before the movement was over. And Beethoven would have loved this because he is quoted as saying, "Silence is not what we want. Applause is what we want." Mozart, too, reveled in the audience's response to his music. And this is a letter that he wrote, where he says, "In the midst of the first allegro came a passage I had known would please." The audience was quite carried away, and there was a great outburst of applause. But, since I knew when I wrote it that it would make a sensation, I had brought it in again and again. So he knew he wanted applause there and repeated the same melody 3 times. He says about the last movement, "I began with 2 violins only, piano, so quietly, for 8 bars, then forte loud, so that at the piano, as I had expected, the audience said, 'shh.' And when they heard the forte, they began at once to clap their hands." Today, we have gotten so far away from how audiences and musicians listened and perceived this music in their time that classical record companies even have a complete guide to good concert manners on their website. This actually says, when music is playing, be quiet, stay put, and do not clap until the whole piece is over. With time, musicians began to capitalize on the enthusiasm of the audience, and superstars like Liszt and Paganini were born. Yes, our first rock stars were classical musicians, and Britney Spears, Lady Gaga, and Justin Bieber owe everything that they do to these first rock stars. Before Bieber fever, there was Listomania. Not kidding. It was a real thing that is documented in articles of the time that swept over Europe during the mid-1800s. Franz Liszt made women hysterical. They would fight over his broken piano strings and locks of his gorgeous hair. They would throw their underwear on stage at him, and they would tear his clothing off if they got close enough.
Wow.
One woman is said to have picked up one of his discarded cigar butts out of the gutter and kept it in a locket around her neck, inscribed FL.
I mean, look at this drawing right here, and this could be a satirical drawing, I don't know. But if it's any depiction of any sort of reality, that looks like a legitimate like pop or rock concert, the way the audience is acting right there for a classical, well, what we would qualify as classical music. Back then, it was how we perceive, pop or rock today. That's how they perceived music back then too. It's really interesting. 500 years from now, what are people going to think about the music that we have today? Are they going to look back on it as classical music? Like, what? It's interesting to think about.
And kept it in a locket around her neck, inscribed FL. Niccolo Paganini, like Liszt, was a show-stopping rock star of the 19th century. Known as the man who made the original deal with the devil for his superhuman violin skills, he was equally well known for his fierce rivalries with other violinists, his drinking, his gambling, his womanizing, and his many rehab stints. Sounds like a rock star to me. He even started his own celebrity franchise, Casino Paganini, which unfortunately failed miserably. He was all about marketing and appearance, and he capitalized on his rumored deal with the devil by showing up to concerts in a black carriage pulled by 4 black horses, and himself dressed all in black. He perpetuated this rumor so well that when he died, he was forbidden burial on sacred ground. Now, one of his most famous quotes is, "I am not a handsome man, but when women hear me play, they come crawling to my feet." So there you have it. Franz Liszt and Niccolo Paganini changed the course of music as we know it. They were the first to play performances entirely by memory and incorporated technical skills that were so difficult and dazzling into their performances that to see them perform was a superhuman feat in and of itself. Some even compared it to the Super Bowl halftime show of the day. Here's a little example. Niccolo Paganini's Caprice No. 5.
She's just going up and down the scales. I would have passed out about halfway through that. Actually, I've never heard a flute play something like that before, so that's really impressive. I didn't know that you could play a flute like that.
Now, these new concert etiquette rules that were solidified in the 20th century have alienated a lot of the audience from my art form, classical music. When we abide by these rules, we lack that visceral response to the music that is the reason why we love and we need it in the first place. It's part of our human nature, and the minute that we're forced to enjoy something within someone else's construct, we stop listening, and we become disengaged from the performance and the music. It becomes inaccessible. What we need to do as classical performers today is break down that barrier between the audience and the stage. We need to have that passion between the audience and performer come back again. And to do this, we might have to change everything about how we perform classical music today. Thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure.
Wow, that is a lot of thought to chew on right there. I was not expecting her to go into that direction with things at all. I thought it was going to be a bit more technical, and I didn't know it was going to be in the realm of how audiences responded to music and how the composers wanted the audience to respond to music. I thought it was fascinating thinking about how the audience basically treated what we would consider classical music back then, but it was very contemporary, like pop music to them back then, just like, again, today's music is to us. First of all, you gotta think about it in that way, which people don't really do. People look at classical music and say, well, that's just something that's always been just classical music, and that's not the case. It's just like, history to us was the current present to people, back then. It wasn't history to them, it was their everyday lives, It's just weird to have to kind of like twist that in your head and think about it in appropriate context. But I think that is really, really important. That is something that I've always tried to get across in my videos, is that you have to put yourself in the context of that day when you study history, anything in history. You have to understand the context of that day for it to make total sense. You can't take our view of it today and transplant it to in the past. It doesn't work that way. So I always argue that context is king, and that's really the only way to fully understand things that have happened in the past. I mean, the flute solo that she did, for instance, you could easily take that and put that in the modern day context, and that would be like a guitar solo of Jimi Hendrix or something. It's the same thing, basically. But then there's this whole other thing about how the concert rules changed, and I don't know when or why this happened. Yeah, I had no idea, really, that the audiences, like I said, behaved the way that they did back then at concerts. But you wouldn't know that today going to a classical music concert. You would think that that was just always the way it had been in the past. Because when you think about hundreds of years ago, you think about people that have maybe a bit more like decorum than we would today, maybe. They're a bit more formal, because we're always seeing people dressed up more and that sort of thing in the past. And you would think that they just behave themselves better at concerts and stuff. Well, that's obviously not the case. Humans have always been humans. And it's weird to think that today we're actually more like formal and have more decorum in those types of concerts than they did back then. But I do wonder, why was there a change? Why all of a sudden is it inappropriate to clap in the middle of a classical music concert? So she might have a point there about, maybe we should kind of rethink how we treat classical music and, maybe allow some of that emotion back into classical music concerts today. But I don't know, like the powers that be, would they allow that to happen? Would musicians like that? Because I get the sense that conductors and musicians, orchestral musicians, do not like having interruptions during the middle of their concert. They consider it rude. But I don't know, like I've never been a musician really in that sort of context. So I don't know. I'd be interested to hear from you guys in the comments. If you've ever played for like an orchestra in these classical music concerts. You know, what do you guys think about that? Would you prefer the audience to be a little bit more interactive in the concert, or do you prefer the way things are where they're just kind of quiet and listening? It's definitely very interesting to think about for sure. So I appreciate it, Mike. This was a very thought-provoking video, I think. I think it fits really well for Music Sundays. It's good to get back to a little bit of classical music because I really did enjoy going through the Howard Goodall Story of Music series. And classical music is one of those genres of music that I want to get to know a little bit better. So hope you guys enjoyed this video too. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Would appreciate it. I do have links to all my social media, email, all of that stuff if you're interested in looking at it. If you want to contact me, those links are in the description and the pinned comment. I also have my Patreon link there as well, where I do different content over on Patreon that I can't do here on YouTube. So if you're interested to check that out, the links are there. And also I have a Star Trek podcast for all of you Trekkies out there. If you want to go check that out, the links are also in the description and the pinned comment. Anyway, Roger here, and I thank you guys for watching. We'll have more Music Sundays. We'll have some more music coming up actually this week as well. So stay tuned for all of that, and we'll see you next time.